Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Gireum Red. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even really know who this guy is. I mean, it took 6 seconds for me to cringe so hard I started shitting ducks. It's a review of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Let's just get this shit started.
Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was the most disappointing thing since my son.
Sir, pardon me, my name is Henry Shore, attorney at Meme, and I'm here to issue you a subpoena for blatant joke theft against one Rebel Taxi Pan Pizza. Your court date is on the 27th. Make sure to bring... Hey, shouldn't you be in Genshin Impact pretending to be a wolf or some shit? Look.
I mean, how much more could you possibly fuck up the remakes to the Generation 4 Pokemon games? And while my son eventually hanged himself in the bathroom at a gas station, the unfortunate reality of the Sinnoh remakes is that they'll be around forever. They'll never go away. They can never be undone.
Alright, look, I'm fully aware that the section title here is Plinkett Parody Opening and is intended to actually send up to Red Letter Media's Mr. Plinkett, who regularly introduces the video with some kind of thing about his son. But the joke is so old that Mr. Plinkett didn't even do it in 2020, you dicking fuck. Hell, I was calling it out as completely unoriginal and a blatant joke theft in 2016. Also, just using somebody's joke without context isn't a parody. You don't even have a good Plinkett voice. Oh, by the way, you don't even need to worry about the other thing. Mr. Pete's already settled his joke theft dispute a long time ago, by the way. You never answered my question. Look.
If someone who's under the age of like 12 says platinum content was unnecessary because this is a Diamond and Pearl remake, then I suggest you shut this review off right now before I carefully explain how much of a fucking idiot you are. So where do I possibly start?
Maybe without randomly insulting people and just reciting something that doesn't belong here and should probably be said to open up your section about lack of need for platinum content? You could start there, or by taking your head out of your ass. You know, either or.
Nothing in BDSP makes any sense at all. It comes off like a game made by an out-of-touch tone-deaf boomer. It's like Junichi Masuda thought the fans just liked the older games over the new, so he just ordered LCA to make it faithful as possible, and they decided to go with it without anyone saying that it's adapting an outdated and broken game, or was a stupid, lazy mess.
Okay, look, this sounds like something that I could cover, but blanket statements at the beginning of a review that set tone and are further explained later on are par for the course in reviews like this. But there's a reason I'm playing this whole intro anyway, and not just skipping it over. First, I want you to understand what his thesis is in the first place. It is outdated and tone deaf to what people currently want. 2, something that'll be clear in a few moments.
I guess at this point, who's gonna question Masuda or tell him what to do? He got some obedient, obscure port developers to remake the game. He probably got rid of those people that questioned him creatively a long time ago.
This is still supposed to be a Mr. Plinkett parody, right? And not just you reviewing the game, right? Again, this doesn't sound problematic other than being overly cynical and insulting, but hey, considering Masuda's vision for Pokemon is the modern games, why would getting a porting team to follow his orders not result in a remake that's more closely resembles the modern games than what you're describing? Yeah, your joke is shooting your other joke in the foot. I'll get the paramedics. Am I gonna be stuck with you for the whole video, or just this little bit?
I also think that everyone just assumed that a Sinnoh remake would be an instant hit, regardless of what the quality was like. Really, how hard could it be to screw up? It's like screwing up mashed potatoes. You boil the water, you burn the packet.
Gireum Red.
Ow! Okay, that's not just because of the sudden volume change for no fucking reason. That was that supposed to be memes? Because it wasn't memes at all. I don't get the joke, nor was it the blatant mood whiplash of you going from a very active and honestly kind of entertaining way of explaining things to deadpan quiet in the PowerPoint presentation that would make Aaron Tempest go, damn son, just buy Premiere already, fuck. Those aren't even what I want to talk about here. It's your mashed potatoes gag. You were so close to actually having a good analogy here. Mashed potatoes should be hard to screw up. So, in fact, should a joke about mashed potatoes being hard to screw up. You have somehow done this. Congratulations. And it is specifically because of your instant mashed potatoes thing. I don't even know that this is the point of the joke, but I feel like perhaps part of the point is the subversion of what people would think of with mashed potatoes by talking about instant mashed potatoes. But part of the way a subversive joke like that would work is if you're not poking a hole in the original joke's concept in the process. Which is exactly what you did. It's easier to fuck up instant mashed potatoes than homemade mashed potatoes. See, if you're using instant mashed potatoes, they're already going to taste worse than homemade because you're basically boiling powder. Even recipes on the package will call for butter and milk because it adds flavor that the instant potatoes are lacking, that ones you mashed up yourself would have inherently. Honestly, the only real way to fuck up regular mashed potatoes is if you don't get rid of the eyes or don't wash them properly, because you can even still make very good mashed potatoes by leaving the skin on and without any other ingredients. The instructions you give of just putting in the packet are terrible because then there's no flavor! I have made a culinary argument in a Pokemon video. So, yeah, that's my life.
Okay, no more shitty parody. Hello, fellow Jerry Cans.
Boy, you sure did shitty parody. Yeah. Well, you got the shitty part right for sure, but I'm not so sure if that was a parody or assault and battery on my eardrums. Maybe the volume change in the intro was? I'll go right up a court order. Thanks! Anyway, what the fuck is this? Who the fuck is you man right here? You just call me a motherfucking drink can? Motherfucker, yo had a gas can? Is that what this is? You joking about drinking gasoline right now? I don't even know what the fuck.
We're finally here, everybody. The long-awaited Generation 4 Sinnoh remakes. Ever since USUM, the Pokemon franchise has been going down a long slope, and we kept asking ourselves, how are they gonna fuck it up this time? Well, this is how, folks. Observe.
Okay, so you kinda, slur your words worse than Joshua Culveyhouse or whatever the fuck his name is now on Quaaludes. So it took me like 3 times listening to understand you were saying the franchise has been going downhill since Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, or USUM. We'll keep that in mind for later, since I want to point out that the only main series games to have come out between then and BDSM was Sword and Shield. Yes, I said BDSM, I'm not changing it. Let's Go was a spin-off, and you could even argue that this is a spin-off in a sense as well, but you know what? We'll cross that bridge, I'm sure.
Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are embarrassing, terrible remakes in my opinion. They really did bare minimum for a quote-unquote remake. I'm even having a hard time calling this Banfa-Doo-Doo a remake because it barely remade the game, which I'll get more into later.
Oh, I'm sure you will, and when you do that, I'll point out how wrong you are about that, including in talking about the art style on your screen right now. Spoilers. But like both of us said, later. Don't want to pop your gas cap too quick on this fuck train.
Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are embarrassing, terrible remakes in my opinion. They really did bare minimum for a quote-unquote remake. I'm even having a hard time calling this Banfa-Doo-Doo a remake because it barely remade the game, which I'll get more into later. But seriously, unless I start taking out features and content from the base game, this is the worst Pokemon remake possible. They did bare minimum. Now, I must make a disclaimer. If you've never played the original Gen 4 Sinnoh games, you will probably enjoy this game. If you only started to play recent dumpster fire games like Sword and Shield, you will get out a kick of this game too. I, however, am not either of these players. I played the old original games and all the previous remakes, so I had expectations as an old fan. This review is based on the context of comparison to the original classic games and other remakes. It may sound unfair, but hey, it's a fucking remake of a classic game.
See, perspective is important, because I'm also someone who's played since first generation, and have played prior remakes and heavily enjoyed the original Diamond and Pearl. Some of the things that you say I agree with. Some modern comfort should have come into play in this version, and when I agree with you, I'll fucking agree with you. I'm not out here to make your life miserable, Mang. I'm just here to make a video.
So what I'm saying is, even though this game doesn't suffer from problems like bad map design or too much hand-holding like recent games, since it's a faithful remake to the OG Gen 4 games.
Okay, so this is definitely gonna bite you in the ass, but sure, I'll just Accept this is just your opinion differing from my own. Look, I'm going to skip through the rest of this intro segment since a lot of your points here are things that you should be elaborating on in the rest of your video, but there are a few things here and there in this part that I would like to address.
Before I start the review, I want to do a burger analogy with the games. That's right, everyone liked the burger analogy from the Let's Go games and USUM review video, so I'm bringing it back. Get Chef Gordon Ramsay in here, let's do this. So, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl was a burger that had good ingredients, but it was unfinished because the patty was uncooked and there was some mold in it.
Fuck off you fat useless sack of fucking Yankee danky doodle shite.
The ingredients aren't good if there's mold, you donkey! The analogy is already falling apart. See, the raw patty thing, sure, that fits. You're saying it was unfinished, but mold? That's not good ingredients. It's more like if it wasn't seasoned well enough or something like that. This is 2 culinary points I've made in the same video on Pokemon. What the fuck is wrong with you? Never cook. Just never cook anything ever, okay? You frighten me if you think good ingredients have a little fucking mold. You didn't need the mold. It just ruins your analogy.
And to top it all off, the burger was ruined by Chef Masuda spilling the rotten 151 Pokédex limit sauce all over the burger.
First of all, it's already ruined because it's raw and moldy. But sure, let's operate on your analogy with the 151 sauce. Was the sauce old and that's why it's rotten? Otherwise, why would that be an ingredient you use in the first place, even in the first game? Like, no, we'll get to what the 151 sauce represents later. I want to address this. First of all, sauce is an ingredient, especially since in your analogy, you're talking about the chef adding it. Was the sauce bad in the first place? If so, why use it in the first burger you put it on? Or is it just old? That would make sense. But, second of all, sauce isn't a good analogy for something that's binary. That either is or isn't there. I mean, technically, with a food analogy like this, a binary choice wouldn't be good anyway, but it's much more fitting with an ingredient like lettuce or tomato, especially considering how I'm going to expand this analogy later.
DP Burger was disgusting. Platinum is a burger where they fixed the burger by getting rid of all the mold and rotten 151 sauce, properly cooking the patty, and added some nice sprinkles such as the Battle Frontier or Distortion World, and became one of the best Pokemon burgers of all time.
Okay, so why the fuck are you putting sprinkles on a burger? This analogy is a hot mess. Like, seriously, do not cook. Alright, so I know that removing mold would be akin to using ingredients that aren't moldy, because I sure as shit hope you don't mean scraping the mold off, you pillock. And, like, you have fries on the plate. Call the Distortion World the fries, man. The fuck is wrong with you? And I'm gonna be fixing your analogy throughout the video anyway, but let me just go ahead and point out the whole 151 sauce analogy a little bit further and why it doesn't work now that we've gotten more detailed with your analogy. See, the 151 sauce, for those who somehow don't get what he means by that, is the fact that the regional Pokedex in Diamond and Pearl only had 151 Pokemon in it. And the problem he states that this creates is, presumably, not enough Pokemon. There's more nuance to his point, but the basic idea is that more is better, especially since he calls out that Platinum removed this limitation, and what they changed was having more Pokemon in the regional Pokedex. Okay, so, who doesn't see the problem with the analogy yet? You're using adding a sauce and removing it as a metaphor for not having enough of something, when not having enough of something is what you can do with a sauce. So let me just make a better metaphor based on the surface level of what your complaints are. The Diamond and Pearl burger had all the right ingredients to be a great burger, but unfortunately didn't live up because Masuda undercooked the burger, it wasn't very filling, and it didn't have enough Pokemon sauce. So when he made the Platinum burger, he gave us more Pokemon sauce, really took his time to cook the burger through, and added a side of Distortion World fries and more toppings to really fill out the meal, making it one of the best Pokemon burgers of all time. Do you see how much better of an analogy this is without the fucking mold?
Now, if you were trying to remake a burger 15 years later, what is the logical burger to copy? Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is an amateur chef named Alca under the command of Chef Masuda trying to faithfully remake the disgusting DP burger down to the uncooked, moldy patty in the terrible rotten 151 sauce while adding nothing new to the recipe. Do you see why I'm calling BDSP terrible remakes?
See, this is the point where you bring in the mold, because this is the point where ingredients being moldy actually strengthens your point. So the amateur chef is told to remake this burger, right? They go with the original recipe rather than the improved platinum recipe, and they use all of the old ingredients. No, like, I don't mean like the same types of ingredients. I mean literally just using the ingredients that have been sitting in the fridge for 15 years to the point where the mold has sentience. Do you get it? Do you get how much more evocative this analogy is? And this isn't even me addressing your complaints with the remakes. This is just me dissecting your analogy. Which, you know, let me be ironic for a sec and make a burger analogy for your burger analogy. So you've got this fresh Angus cut of an analogy, right? But you want to really make it tasty. And you know what's the tastiest thing to you? 151 sauce. You just love putting 151 sauce all over your analogies, yeah? So what do? You marinate the meat in the 151 sauce. Make sure that the 151 sauce soaks into the analogy, like some other analogy within an analogy that probably shouldn't even be made because it'll get confusing. I mean, hey, sure, your 151 sauce is a little old, it's got a little mold in there, but ingredients are still good if they have a little mold, right? And so you've got this marinated, and you're thinking on how to cook it. Nah, fam, fuck that. People love analogies that are undercooked, not well developed. So you just slap that shit right onto the video bun. Then you can't help but feel like something's missing. Dress up that burger with some distortion lettuce and Masuda tomatoes, a little extra garnish to help the flavor of your raw burger drenched in moldy sauce. I mean, sure, your lettuce is wilting from oversimplification. You forgot to wash the Masuda, but like you said, a little mold still makes the ingredients good. A little dirt never hurt anybody. Oh, but you still feel like you're missing something. Nuance? Nah. Punchline? Nah, that's not it. Wait. I got it. More fucking mold. What I'm saying is that your analogy is rotten, underdeveloped, and disgusting. Notice how evocative I was with the analogy? You should be doing more of that in the future.
So, let's review this son of a gun game, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, released for the Nintendo Switch in 2021.
Stop. I fucking hate multiple intro graphics. Why do people do this? It's completely unnecessary. Okay, you know what? Let's make another burger analogy. So you're making this review burger, right? You've got the meat of the review. You need to dress it up real nice. You got these analogy tomatoes that have a little mold because you like them like that. No, I'm not letting that go. And then you go for your intro lettuce. You put the intro lettuce on. You get more intro lettuce. You put that on too. Double the lettuce means double the flavor, right? No, it means that your bland-ass intro lettuce is drowning out the taste of this juicy, meaty review. There's too much of it, and it's unbalancing the flavors you put in the review. Yeah, I might continue with more food analogies this whole time. I'm having fun, and you, in fact, are a bitch.
You fucking donut!
Part 1. It's a Diamond and Pearl remake, not Platinum. I recently made a video titled, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl will probably suck. Most people agree with me, but it was the most heavily disliked video I've ever made. And to be fair, I knew there were going to be a lot of haters with a clickbait title like that. I just wanted to reward myself a clickbait video that will guarantee to get views after I put so much effort into an hour-long ORAS review that barely got any views. So please understand I need to put food on my table too. LOL.
Hey, fun fact, I get views from the shit that's actually quality. Also, if you're saying right now that the video wasn't good, yeah, like I said, not an excuse. You can clickbait while still providing quality content. I should know because of my video entitled Why Samurai Jack's Ending Doesn't Make Sense. And people shat all over that video. Initially. Then after like 2 days, people calmed down and my comment section started filling with people who just didn't get why my dislikes were so high on that video. Because it presented good reasoning for my conclusion. And that's what you need to fucking do. Provide good reasoning, and it doesn't matter how hot your take is. Haters gonna hate, and the positive press is still gonna happen.
Anyways, I got 3 types of angry comments that try to rebuttal my predictions that BDSP will suck ass, where only one has any credential. First was, the game's not out yet, how can you judge it? That's true. I was just predicting with my logical deduction based on the marketing method and trailers, so that's a valid criticism. That video wasn't a review, and well, the game is out now, so here we are.
See, while this is a valid criticism, it is also something you could have said in the video in order to stem some of the hate. Yeah, it is a valid criticism, but if you made the video with awareness of that critique, then you wouldn't have to worry about it as much. And no, I didn't watch that video, but that leads me to the other side of this coin. So, if you did bring up that you were only making prediction and not really judging the final product, this complaint on its own is no longer valid. If you presented the video to properly convey the fact that this was predictive and not prejudgment, that complaint doesn't fly without more context for why your predictions don't make sense. So, either way, the way you address this, yeah, you're either saying something is valid when it's not, or you're addressing something past the point when you should have in response to the criticism about it. So, which is it? I mean, I could watch the original and find out which it is, but I want you to tell me. Because I expect honesty out of somebody that I'm talking to.
Second comment was, this is a remake of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Why do you expect Platinum content? Well, to that I say, have you actually fucking played the previous Pokemon remakes? Mainly Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where it was really a Crystal remake because the games included Crystal content like the Eugene, Suicune, and the Battle Frontier/Frontier.
Okay, the Battle Frontier was actually the Battle Tower, the original Crystal version, but sure. They added a minor subplot from the original game. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire added a whole storyline. Are you shitting me right now? Oh, but I'm sure you'll show some kind of awareness for the Platinum features retained in the remake, right?
Also, in my recent Platinum review, please go watch it, you'll understand my perspective better. I stated many times that Diamond and Pearl are broken, bland, one of the worst Pokemon games that were saved by Pokemon Platinum. It had great potential, but was hampered down by unfinished stories and a dumbass limited Pokédex, and Sinnoh was finally realized in Platinum. Pokemon Platinum really should be named Pokemon Diamond and Pearl but fixed. So my question is, why oh why choose to adapt an inferior version of a game to a faithfully remake when a superior game exists? And no people, just including Giratina's theme in this game or Platinum clothes as fucking early purchase bonus in the game, doesn't count.
Oh, okay. So, do Origin form Giratina, the different Rotom forms, Shaman and his Sky form, Honey Trees, and the upgraded versions of Super Contest, and the inclusion of number updates that weren't even in Platinum? Do those not count? What, you mad because your precious Distortion World dungeon ain't here? I'm just waiting for you to say something other than Distortion World in 151 that Diamond and Pearl doesn't have that Platinum does.
Now, I get it. A Diamond and Pearl remake is much more marketable than a Platinum remake because Platinum didn't sell as much, for obvious reasons. Dialga and Palkia are much more iconic and marketable fuckers to put on the cover of the game compared to poor Giratina, so I kinda get why they chose to do this in a marketing perspective. So, choosing to have Dialga or Palkia appear as Spirit Pillar instead of Giratina maybe makes sense. But still, they could have included so many minor changes or added features from Platinum that wouldn't affect the story that much or stop it from being a Diamond and Pearl remake.
Do you mean like the ones I just mentioned? Give me something other than LOL 151 to work with, man. Your burger is looking real thin on the meat and real heavy on that 151 sauce and distortion lettuce right now.
Like, these minor additions from Platinum gone in this game would have been easy to program in and would have taken none or very little effort if they even had the slightest will to make a fucking good game. But they of course did not. For example,
oh thank fuck, finally.
Rowan giving a speech and roasting the poor Tingati grunts at Eterna City. It's just extra lines of dialogue. Why can't this be in the remake? Or minor story events like Barry wanting to become Crasher Wolf's apprentice that gave him character and more memorable, and him hiding behind the cute sign.
Bro, you were talking about features, not tiny ass pieces of fucking dialogue. This is your example of shit from Platinum that was so bad to not include? This is Nitpick City, bitch! Your burger really is just a Carpaccio sliver, ain't it?
Platinum restructured the game so that you aren't constantly backtracking to Hearthstone City or Lost Tower in the mid-game, and I don't think there are DP purists out there that would have gotten mad if you copied this structure for a fucking DP remake.
Well, for one, returning to a central location is actually kind of one of the main staples of a Pokemon game. In fact, a lot of games with an overworld oftentimes still have a central hub that the storyline returning to marks as sort of an unofficial chapter marker. I am expecting you to call out mechanical aspects of Platinum that weren't put into BDSP that actually would be improvements. And you're over here talking about slight backtracking in an RPG. And the reason this is so bad is because how much you talked up how bad these games and the original Diamond and Pearl are. Fuck me, dude, your points are what has mold in this video.
Platinum added in small stuff like versus sprites or made Team Galactic's building interior decor actually look like a fucking villain's lair, not a copy paste of the apartment building you find at other places. Like, these little things don't have to be faithfully adapted for a DP remake. These are small improvements that should be in the fucking remake. God.
Okay, so when I was watching this video, I had no idea what the fuck the first thing you said was. And at first I had a point here about how you can rebattle gym leaders because I thought you were talking about something like that, but on a train or some shit. But then I had other people listen to it and figured out you were talking about versus sprites, which they had versus sprites in the original Diamond and Pearl, and they have it in this game. And your complaint is that they didn't use the ones from Platinum. You know, honestly, I would have preferred the train thing. Then it wouldn't feel like putting a gun to my head with your stupidity. As for the office building thing, hey, you know what makes sense? A villain's lair not looking like a fucking villain's lair, so that it makes sense that they aren't immediately arrested and put in prison. You know, for being a crime syndicate. I'm not even saying that I would have minded the change, but I am saying that not only does it not fucking matter, but there are reasons why it's not objectively better in Platinum.
When I was playing other remakes in the Pokemon series, I was in the mindset of, I wonder what they added in this time, or I wonder how they have changed this time. Contrarily, while I was playing Pokemon BDSP's main campaign, I was on a constant roll of saying, so that's gone now. For example, so the cool decor for the Elite Four in their respective rooms is gone now. So the story events with Looker so that you don't miss important HM items are gone now.
The decor in the Elite Four rooms? Okay, sure. But it does make more sense for the rooms to be standardized. And again, super minor. The Looker thing is kind of a valid point, but weren't you just complaining about excessive hand-holding in modern Pokemon games? Yeah. Isn't this that when it comes to Looker pointing out the important items and TMs to you? Exploration is part of Pokemon. And if you're mad about these missions being gone, specifically the reasoning you're giving, by the way, is because of being able to miss HMs without them, then you're really just complaining about the thing you were saying would be bad.
So the Team Galactic story of Karen at Stark Mountain is gone now.
I don't even understand what you just said other than Stark Mountain, but basically, the end of the Looker subplot? So, the thing you already complained about? Not repetitious at all. 10 out of 20.
The versus sprites are gone now, so we can't see Maylene's feet in HD now. 마스다 형!
Sorry about your Burger King foot lettuce fetish.
Also, like I pointed out in Platinum's review, in the story, not just the Spear Pillar event was fixed. We had Cyrus showing up more in the story than just, 4 times in DP and BDSP. His speech at Team Galactic's building that showed his ideals, gone. Him revealing to the player that he's Team Galactic's boss early in the game and battling you because it's super obvious, gone. Cyrus losing his temper and ranting at the player to show how he's a hypocrite, gone. Great quotes like, I won't accept this can't be, not after all the sacrifices we've made to get this far. What of my new world, of my new galaxy? Was this all a dream to be swept away by your reality? Gone. Siffy actually having a fucking role in the story and telling Cyrus that emotions give life meaning, making the game actually have a message? Gone. We're seriously back to Cyrus disappearing as Spear Pillar after saying he'll be a god one day.
Please clap.
Yeah, alright, so fuck you then. While the way Platinum does the story is quite good, Team Galactic is probably my favorite villain team, and that's without the strength of Cyrus as the antagonist, because part of the weight is that we don't really see a lot of our main villain giving him this lofty perch that we eventually strike him down from. It's kind of like Getsis as a villain. We barely see him, and that makes his status as the one manipulating N stronger. We mostly fight Mars and Jupiter, and the uncertainty of who the villain really is, granted, you do have a point that his logo is more visible in Diamond and Pearl. That does weaken that. But the fact that we barely see him and he's much more on a perch actually helps the character. Especially since he's not really very well written in general, and Platinum doesn't really fix that. It just gives you more of the thing that's not well written. So, you know.
If Platinum was a giant leap for Pokemon, BDSP is a fumbling step back and falling flat on its face.
Really? Platinum was a giant leap forward. And what the fuck did it leap forward in any way regarding Pokemon? What did it do exactly? Because I can point out things that other games did for the series as a whole that were positive changes objectively that Platinum did not do or were already being done. All Platinum did at the end of the day in terms of leaping forward was it leapt forward the standards for shitty, confusing dungeon design in a series that already had shitty and confusing dungeons. I don't give a fuck. I'll say it. Platinum is actually the worst third version to ever exist, and I'm very much counting Pokemon fucking Blue.
Everything wrong with this fucking game can be probably summarized with literally one button. Diamond and Pearl had one button on the Pokédex. Platinum had two, so it can go back and forth between features on the Pokédex. Of course, it's faithfully recreated to have one button in this remake. Is having one button for tradition or faithfulness more important than a fucking logical convenience function?
Really? The big innovation you want to use to summarize the problems is a fucking button? Like, I even agree this technically is a valid criticism for reasons you describe, especially since BDSP has an actual necessary feature in the Pokédex. But there was also a removed app since the information you got from it was made easily accessible elsewhere in the interface. You want to know why they would do that? Because the Pokédex isn't fucking important. The Pokédex is such a tertiary feature that by the next generation, everything it does was completely erased from its replacement, the C-Gear. And this is yet another example of a sparse, tiny flaw that is so blatantly blown out of proportion that it makes statements like this.
In the end, playing this game just makes you wish you were playing Pokemon Platinum instead. And I kid you not, I was completely miserable when playing this game and thought it was a threat to my mental health because I was forcing myself to play it on camera when I didn't want to.
Into a clear sign of such extreme thirst for Giratina's Big Daddy Dragon Cock that got you shopping on badpokedragon.com and setting up a Tinder profile where you list your hobbies as hating DP and getting your, okay, I'm pretty sure he gets the point. You're not even supposed to be here! And you're supposed to be monetized. What's your point? You know what? Fair.
You fucking donut!
Part 2. It's a remake, so of course it's faithful and original. Or remake versus remaster. The third kind of angry comment I got was, it's a remake, so of course it's faithful and original. To that again I say, have you played the previous remakes, you can't call you an idiot because that would be toxic, but you phonies?
I mean, you're already pretty damn toxic without it, so don't let that stop you. And this is actually a fair criticism of BDSP, which has me wondering how you're gonna fuck this one up.
Even if Platinum didn't exist, BDSP is still a lame remake compared to Pokemon Fire and Leaf Green, Hardcore Disco Silver, Omega Ruby and Sapphire, and possibly even the Let's Go games. Yes, I'm dead fucking serious. Because it barely adds anything new, and chooses to be faithful to the old games, unlike the previous remakes. I really hate the word faithful now. Faithful remake sounds like something a politician or a corrupt corporation would say to rebrand morally ambiguous actions. Faithful, I'll translate that for you. It means unoriginal, lazy, rushy, and cutting corners. Let us pretend third games like Crystal, Emerald, Platinum didn't exist. I argue BDSP still can't stand on its own. How is BDSP still inferior compared to the previous remakes? Well, to that, let's answer the question, is this game a remake or remaster? So let's define both words.
I'll take one of my favorite games of all time, GoldenEye 007 on Nintendo 64 as an example. A remaster of a video game is a video game re-release where the base coding program structure is the same, and the only thing usually updated is aesthetic stuff like graphics or the music. All the story, level design, and characters are usually the same.
Oh, I see. So that means that BDSP isn't a remaster then, right? Because, you know, they changed the system by which HMs work, added type and type matchups that weren't present in the original Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. And really the only thing that wasn't updated in some capacity from the original Diamond and Pearl were story elements and a button on Pokédex. Sure. So, that's where this is going. BDSP is a remake, so it should live up to other remakes in terms of additional content, correct?
GoldenEye 007 never got an official remaster, but Rare tried to make one in the 2000s on the Xbox 360, but Eon, Microsoft, and Nintendo couldn't get into an agreement. But the file was leaked online recently, and this is a remaster of GoldenEye 007 you're seeing right now. Please agree once for the Nintendo Switch Online, please. Anyways, on the flip side, a remake of video game usually means making a new game from the ground up, and they are usually reimaginings. For example, for GoldenEye 007 on the Nintendo Wii, the game was remaked into a shooter that feels more like a Call of Duty game because it was popular to rip off Modern Warfare at the time. Although levels, controls, character models, environments were different, the game actually had voice acting, and even James Bond was changed from Pierce Brosnan to Daniel Craig.
Ah, I see. So because the remake used an updated engine and changed the visual appearance of the characters, it was a remake then. Those two elements in particular are what you want to call out as defining a remake, yes? Alright, I'll keep that in mind while listening to the rest of your explanation. I see very little chance of this biting you in the ass since you're going to call BDSP a remake and not a remaster, which kind of makes you feeling the need to define this a moot point in the first place.
Hey, James. For England? For England, Alec.
This is the difference between remaster and remake. Okay, so since we now know what remake and remasters are, let's talk about the previous Pokemon remakes before BDSP. Even though the games are mostly the same, Pokemon remakes felt like actual reimaginings. They felt like a Mew take on Kanto, Johto, and the Hoenn region. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green felt like Pokemon Red and Blue, reimagined on Ruby and Sapphire's engine. Heart Gold and Soul Silver felt like Gold and Silver reimagined on Diamond and Pearl's engine, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire felt like Ruby and Sapphire reimagined on X and Y's engine. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, however, is anything but a Mew take on Sinnoh, or Diamond and Pearl reimagined on Sword and Shield's engine.
Ah, I see. So all these other remakes redo the game in a new engine, while BDSP doesn't do that. Even though the actual core of Pokemon's gameplay, the combat, actually does operate on the new engines. I would call you full of shit for implying the distinction even needed to be made between remake and remaster, but, well, you're about to elaborate.
You see, BDSP blurs the line between remake and remaster, because by definition, BDSP is a remake since they aren't using the resources of the original games and remade the game completely from the ground up. But they tried their damnedest hard to make it faithful to the original. Like, the steps they went through to make this video game to be faithful to the OG games is absurd and almost comical. Not just the map design look exactly the same, the story and dialogue is the exact same.
Why that pause there? Was it just to show us that the cutscenes were the same but with the graphical upgrade? Okay, but you played the same cutscene from GoldenEye back-to-back in order to show us the difference between remake and remaster. And they had the same dialogue, only one was voice acted and the other wasn't. One used cinematic camera angles that weren't possible in the original games. But there's a big difference in these remakes. Diamond and Pearl was already capable of the shot needed to tell that story. So why change it? There's no game engine restriction there in order for them to change. And you don't even show anything with dialogue. Not that it matters because the clip you showed earlier also had the same dialogue. Changing the dialogue wasn't pointed to as anything different between a remaster and a remake, so why is it suddenly such a defining trait that's the first thing that you want to point out here?
The Pokemon every single fucking NPC have is the same.
Hold the fuck up! The Pokemon can be mechanically different without changing species, and I'm pretty sure that you know that. First of all, the fact the combat system has changed since the original Generation 4, including the learn set of that Pachirisu on screen, which includes Volt Switch, which wasn't in the original Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, thus disproving your argument about a lack of change in the engine. Your partner's Chansey in that battle, that's already preset, by the way, in what moves it has different moves right now from the original. Disarming Voice, a special fairy move that wasn't in the original game. Sweet Kiss, which gives it the ability to induce status that it couldn't do before. Tail Whip, that no one cares about. And Life Dew as its healing move, which is a group heal introduced this generation, thus making this Chansey no longer just a tank that doesn't help its ally very much. Same species, but as I've highlighted with my points, these are not the same Pokemon, because the engine has changed them from their original forms inherently.
The character designs look exactly the same. Even the fucking goofy poses they do whenever a battle starts is the same, and the official art of characters and Pokemon they have on the website is the exact same as the sprites.
Okay, so what? Just because the GoldenEye remake changed Pierce Brosnan to Daniel Craig, that doesn't mean every remake has to change the designs. This is essentially the same argument you were making with Platinum, but I can refine this argument even further. Is it at all possible that the original designs for the characters were, you know, just better than the original designs of the prior generation gym leaders, so there was less of a need to change them? That's the thing. In GoldenEye, there's a reason they changed Pierce Brosnan to Daniel Craig. It was because Daniel Craig was the current James Bond as of that game. Now, you can make the argument that the game would be improved if they did change them, and I wouldn't really be able to argue with that, because that'd be a valid criticism to hold against it if you felt that way. But that's not the point you're making. You're using this fact to call it less of a remake when, in reality, you can recreate the game entirely as it originally was, with no graphical updates, and it would still be a remake, because that's the actual definition of a fucking remake. A remake is making the game again, and a remaster is tweaking the game. That's way more simple than what you said, and doesn't shoot your own arguments in the foot. And is also still completely unneeded, by the way!
Imagine if they made a Gold and Silver remake, but had Morty still wearing the shitty white t-shirt, or Price still stuck in his original hobo sailor clothes instead of the suit and coat he got. Even the UI is a bastardized version of Diamond and Pearl's one by mixing it into a Frankenstein with Sword and Shield, and it's the worst UI I've ever seen for the series.
Wait, so what you're saying is they used elements of the UI of both the original Diamond and Pearl and the newest Pokemon game in order to create a new UI? That sounds like a remake, doesn't it? Or was the point of that just so you can bitch in a way that doesn't at all reflect what you're actually talking about in this segment? It kind of sounds like the latter. Why are you still here?
You fucking donut!
And my friends, this is why I say the game was creatively doomed from the start, because it seems like a waste of effort. You're remaking from scratch. Why not add things that are new or reimagine some stuff that didn't work in the original games? To quote the developer of Game Freak, who exists in-game and Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, "We are remaking an old game, but this is quite a challenge. Old fans will not want to mess with their good memories. But there is no point in just redoing the same thing, right?"
Y'all know I already proved this argument wrong, right? See, changing Chansey's moveset, that required actual thought. They could have decided to leave the original moves on Chansey instead of including the fairy moves and changing its moveset to give it a specific strategy that helped a double battle rather than having an attack and 2 self-heals. But you know what they did? Actively made changes to a move list in order to change the experience. That's a lot more tangible a change than redesigning clothes or adding a couple of lines of dialogue. Hell, some of the changes were in Platinum. Cynthia's second battle team is identical to her post-start mountain team. Well, I mean, identical by your standards anyway. They have the same species and levels. In addition, the held items that the original generation didn't use even on champions. Yeah, Cynthia uses those now. And don't get me started on the completely new third match team, including the swap from Roserade to Porygon Z. Yeah, totally exactly the same. Gameplay hasn't changed at all. Fuck you too, dude.
Like I said with the burger analogy in the intro, it's like trying to create a burger from scratch, but copying the exact same moldy, uncooked burger. Don't ruin the new patty by working hard to start growing mold on its pink surface.
Oh, for fuck's sake, we're back here again? Okay, if the patty is growing mold, and that means it's expired, which almost works here for what your point is supposed to be. You're saying it was already undercooked in your previous section, and in this section you're talking about how you're just using the same patty from 15 years ago that's got mold on it. But that's not what your analogy was! Your analogy was to say that the burger had mold to begin with, while, and I cannot let this go in the slightest since you're doubling down, you said it had good ingredients. And why is the bun green if the patty is moldy? In fact, let me correct your analogy a little. No, they aren't serving you the same burger that you already had last time. You did enjoy it enough to come back for the Platinum Burger and for this one that was being promoted as the new and improved Diamond and Pearl Burger. So I question the validity of your claims of it being covered in mold if you keep coming back for it. We've looked at the original recipe of the Diamond and Pearl Burger, and we still like it, but some of the flavors are imbalanced. We had a nice kick at the end, swapping a few ingredients and amounts, and we think we've gotten the recipe just slightest bit better than what we originally did. So you order the new recipe of the Diamond and Pearl Burger. You take a bite, and start yelling at us for not giving you the Platinum Burger. Sir, this is a Wendy's?
They were gonna go this direction of keeping everything the same. They should have done an upscale remaster with the original games or something, because the 2D graphics, frankly, look much more beautiful. And this is just a waste of effort, such as 3D graphic designing and resources like the poor people at RCA.
The 2D graphics looking better is a subjective opinion. It's a review, that's fine. Look, I'm sorry it didn't completely overhaul the character designs from the ground up and turn Cynthia into Fischl or some shit, but honestly, get over yourself. If you think the graphical style they chose here wasn't good, then that's a criticism for a review. Sure, absolutely. But honestly, with how you dismiss tangible changes for small things you can visibly see, it is literally pissing me off.
Parse 3. Comparison with previous remakes.
So in other words, how you should have actually addressed the argument you cited at the beginning of part 2. Look, most of this segment I don't really have a lot to say about, but there's a couple of points that I do actually want to cover.
In BDSP, we have none of these. Everything is beat for beat, even things that sucked. We still have the alcohol pocket just sitting on its ass on Spirit Pillar and doing nothing after swimming up RGB lights because it's motherfucking Kanto references. Since BDSP is a Gen 8 video game, if this was like past series, there would have been things introduced in Sword and Shield like Gigantamax and Stadium Gym battles in the game. Yeah, I know why everyone hated Gigantamax, but in my opinion, you should just bite the bullet and try to refine something that didn't work so it works in a new installment. Not just delete it and pretend like it doesn't exist. Sort of like Disney and the Star Wars sequels.
Okay, first of all, they didn't get rid of the canon of the Star Wars sequels, but like, whatever, not the point of the video. I'm working on enough of that as is with another project I've got. Not really in the case of those two things, actually. GMAX kind of requires the setting of Sword and Shield to work properly, with only a few places otherwise where it could be incorporated. Admittedly, they could have done a few GMAX battles, make some legendaries GMAX, and incorporate that into Gym Leaders and Pokemon League a bit. But, well, that would require Stadium Gym battles, which, yeah, hard no on that being in a remake. Look, I'm not going to go too far into it, but imagine if this remake was in Gen 7 and they replaced all the gyms with something more like the Island Trials. It's a complete overhaul of the mechanics of the way gyms work that fundamentally changes the whole of what's going on. See, previous games did more to reimagine puzzles, sure, but they kept the themes and ideas from the original games intact. Doing Stadium Gym battles would have fundamentally flew in the face of what was already there. That's part of the issue with incorporating more stuff from Sword and Shield. A lot of it is much more difficult to place into a previous Pokemon game than Mega Stones or double battling. When you highlight that, you are winding up making the case for why more of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl wasn't new. It really couldn't be. It's like the quote you gave from in the game earlier. Remaking an old game is challenging because you don't want to tread over people's memories.
Like, I thought this game was going to be Diamond and Pearl, but the battles are updated with Pokemon stats or new abilities and fairy type.
Except they were! These changes were in the fucking game! Dumbass! No, I don't even care about your EXP share point. That's a carried over element from Sword and Shield, by the way. That you make an incredibly sloppy transition towards. You are expecting the thing that you got, who gives a shit if EXP share exists, you fucking...
But then why are the TMs single use again? The last installment introduced TRs, or items that were meant to be like the old TMs. Why is everything battle related new, but the TMs old?
Although I would agree that TMs being single-use would have come across better if they just called them TRs instead, especially considering the fact that you get more of them inherently, and all the TMs are repeatably obtainable, which is another difference from the originals that makes them more like TRs. I can kind of explain why they didn't, though. See, most of the time the remakes are actually placed in generations that take place at the same time as the generation they're a part of. Ruby and Sapphire take place at the same time as the story of Fire Red and Leaf Green, and Diamond and Pearl takes place at the same time at Heart Gold and Soul Silver. However, one notable aspect is that these two remakes also serve as a retcon of sorts of the previous games. I mean, think about it. These remakes involve enhancements like the physical special split and whatnot. Now, the timeline is admittedly a little muddled, but Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire notably have dialogue in the Delta episode that points towards multiple timelines, with Zinnia talking about events repeating themselves in the game. Look, it's not worth going too deep into. Now, what most people believe is the explanation for Oris and X and Y, I'm going to go into it anyway, and the fact that Mega Evolutions are straight up gone from the games after this point, is that this is an alternate timeline from the rest of the series. However, BDSP doesn't have that distinction. So, basically, my simple answer is just that. There were storyline reasons for the other remakes to exist, but Diamond and Pearl doesn't have those storyline reasons, and thus doesn't have as many of the changes. What used to be known as TMs are, as of the timeline in Sword and Shield, referred to as TRs, because the technology behind TMs advanced to the point where they could be used repeatedly. Oh, and keep in mind, this is still me partially agreeing with your point, but I do want to address the actual purpose of the entire tirade I'm glossing over, some things being the same and some things being different. The other remakes do that too, you dingus! That's like asking why the main character of previous remakes weren't redesigned, or why Oris didn't include trainer customization, or why Fire Red and Leaf Green didn't have contests, or why Heart Gold and Soul Silver still had an unknown in it. They're allowed to choose things to keep and things to change, and if you don't like that decision, that's one thing. But to dismiss the fact that they chose one thing and not another as hypocritical just because you didn't like the thing they brought back as much is completely and utterly ridiculous.
You fucking donut!
Everything wrong with this game can be summed up with the Poke Edge. The Poke Edge was a gimmick that only worked because it was on the hardware of the Nintendo DS, a console that had a dedicated bottom screen with a touchscreen gimmick. Copying that on the Switch makes no sense because the Switch doesn't have a separate bottom screen with a touchscreen. As a result, the UI of the Poke Edge feels so clunky and an ass to use because you have to manually move a pointer to emulate clicking on a touchscreen.
Yes, because as we all know, the Nintendo Switch does not have the touch screen. Are you aware of how full of shit you are? The touchscreen and the regular screen are the same screen on the Switch. Like, I kind of thought that your first complaint would be that it wasn't on a separate screen, which is at least a real thing that is true, even if it isn't disqualifying in its own right. But no, the pointer comment proved that you are just flat out lying in order to say that something is bad when it isn't. Hell, if anything, the remake does better because it has a means for people to use the feature even if their touchscreen is unresponsive. So yes, I'm sure increased accessibility is a major fucking problem. You know how you keep saying this game's got a moldy patty? Yeah, in the context of a review, lying about the product would be considered mold. It's disgusting, it has no value, and serves as an indicator that you shouldn't trust the restaurant to make another one. Don't fight me on these burger puns, you donkey!
Just reimagine the Poke Edge as a Poke Edge Plus or something. They just did that with a Poke Knife and Oras. Can't you do that here too?
You are literally showing a screen of you using an HM from the Poke Edge, which is exactly what you were talking about needing to be done. Piss off.
Part 4. Masuda at 151 Episode 3, The Cursed Revenge of the Cantonian Strike Back returns. But out of all the things they decided to keep faithful, the worst thing is the motherfucking 151 Diamond and Pearl decks. For people who are new to the series, quick reminder, DP had a measly small 151 decks because Masuda was homaging Kanto, the best generation in region or something. So many new Pokemon that were introduced in Sinnoh were cut from the game and were available to the post-game, and many NPCs used nonsensical teams. You had an arbitrary force limit on the available Pokemon to use, and this is one of the main reasons why DP was one of my least favorite games in the series for me. And whoop-de-fucking-do, that's back in this game too!
First of all, lore. There's lore reasons you would include a more limited number of Pokemon available from the off, and that has to do with it making sense that Pokemon from everywhere wouldn't necessarily be here. That being said, there's one valid argument to be made here. Some new Pokemon that are evolutions of pre-existing ones are not available until after the national decks. That is actually a valid point. Those that are relevant to what's being introduced should probably just be in the regional decks, which with cuts made if they want to keep it at 151. But what was that about cutting Kanto? First of all, storyline, this game is closer to gold and silver than red and blue, but sure, I guess all the Gen Run trade evolutions, the Psyduck line, the Goldeen line, the Ponyta line, the Tentacool line, were in the Sinnoh original decks in Diamond and Pearl, and I'm not even counting the ones that had pre-evolutions or evolutions introduced in the later generation, including Pikachu. And the Platinum Expanded Regional decks didn't include anything that didn't have a later generation include. So that argument especially doesn't hold water when you look at your Platinum worship. Oh, but I'm sure I won't have to expand on this further, will I? It's not like this whole segment is going to be you spouting quantity over quality.
I remember when the game's first trailer were introduced, people saw that Porygon Z was in the trailer, so they actually said, phew, at least they're adapting the Platinum's 210 Pokédex. Well,
so that was a fucking lie.
We really still have Electric-type Gym Leader Volkner using an Ampipom and Octillery, Fire-type Elite for Flint using many non-Fairy Pokemon, and Snowy Point and Canalave Gym Trainers using random Pokemon instead of their Gym type.
Okay, while the fact that they later use teams that are more focused on their types in rematch battles doesn't negate your point, it's worth noting that, yeah, non-pure typing was done for a reason. Now, Ambipom, granted, weird choice on paper, I'll give you that, but let's start by examining Octillery a little bit further here. See, Electric's one weakness is ground, so if he were Lieutenant Surge, all it would take is one ground Pokemon about the same level to just wipe out his entire team if it was pure Electric. Not a great look. Octillery is water, meaning any ground moves will be less effective on him, and all of his moves except the electric type move, because we are still dealing with an electric specialist here, are going to be super effective against most likely types to have ground moves, meaning he is a coverage pick. Now, let's take a look at Ambipom's list. He's a bit weirder in BDSP than the original Diamond and Pearl, but that's because he's no longer a baton pass mod. He originally had agility and nasty plot to pass over to the rest of the team in order to increase damage and make them faster, but that becomes a little less good with Luxray now being a pure physical sweeper instead of the mixed sweeper he was in the original. This is modern gym leader team design, my dude. Instead of going all in, you use the type in question as a centerpiece and include secondary pieces in order to complement it. That's why Raihan, in spite of being the dragon type gym leader, oftentimes uses a weather team. The dragons he uses benefit from the weather conditions he uses on those teams. This is something you would especially do with later game leader like Volkner. And now, with Flint, I kind of see your point. Nothing here mitigates Fire's water weakness, although Drifblim does a good job of mitigating ground while being a baton passer, as in not what's going to kill you, and Steelix helps undermine the rock weakness alongside the fighting moves, further aided by Lopunny's high jump kick. Like, an Elite Four especially should be using more advanced tactics than all one type in order to win, but I can go even further with that. I can prove these teams were intentionally designed to not only use Pokemon of a given type. Volkner, for one, has Pachirisu as an option in a pre-National Dex team, and it's not used considering Pachirisu now has been used in a World Championship composition as well. You can't exactly call it an underpowering team in the case of the remake with a straight face, can ya? As for Flint, hey, you do kind of got me there, although Platinum also had a shortage of fire types in the regional decks where Flint was using everything, but, well, easier dismissal than all of this is just to point at Lance in every single goddamn game and just be done with it. And he uses multiple of the same species in some of those games, even discounting the first two generations for lacking dragon types in general.
However, this 151 Pokédex limit is still somehow more nonsensical than the original DP games because of the Underground. You can catch Pokemon in the wild area caves of the Underground, and surprise, you can actually catch Platinum Dex Pokemon here, and you get access to the Underground pretty early on in the game, right after the second gym. But there's some brain genius out that you shouldn't get the National Dex until you beat the game. As a result, non-151 Pokemon you catch on the Dex don't get Pokédex entries until you beat the game. What sense does that make? Is this catching Pokemon and reading their entries like one of the fundamental elements of the series? Just give us the National Dex, or at least a 210 Platinum Dex when we get access to the Underground. And if you're to let players use the Platinum Dex Pokemon, let the NPCs like Flint and Volkner use them too. But oh no, getting the National Dex early wouldn't be faithful to the DP games, right?
See, now this is somewhat of a good point, kind of undercut by you saying that reading Pokedex entries is a central part of the game. It's not. I mean, they could just give the National Dex early, but that's where the complaint becomes a valid one. if minor, because you're still getting your expanded roster even without being able to read a tiny blurb on why your Snorunt is supposed to be cool. And yeah, the trainers could, in theory, use the underground Pokemon. Although, something worth noting, it's kind of hamstrings your entire thing about 151, doesn't it? It's just the dex this applies to. It has no real bearing on what the player can use and what variety the player has at their disposal. Oh, and on top of that, open world areas where you can fight and capture Pokemon by actively choosing to engage them, where you can see them? Can't think of another game this generation does that. Nope. Not a one. Man, you're really good at making your own video fucking irrelevant, you know that?
Ugh, this game fucking sucks and is literally nonsensical. Again, let's compare it to the previous remakes. Fire Red and Leaf Green, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire all had a full national dex. And one of the best things about those remakes is that you could use mirror Pokemon in it.
Except none of them included it from the beginning. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl has the national dex, and its unlike requirements are the same as in the original, which isn't far off from what every game in the fucking series that has a full national dex does. So it's an outright lie to say that other games are different in this capacity. National dex has always been post-game, you chuckle fuck!
Being able to use Sinnoh, Unova, and Calyx Pokemon was awesome. Like I said in the ORAS review, being able to use Mew Pokemon and their forms is one of the best aspects of the remakes, but after the Sword and Shield National Dex cut, they said they won't ever give us a game with all Pokemon ever again, even though they've been using the same models for 8 years now.
Okay, so for one, no they haven't, but for two, is this the thing? The thing you want to complain about? The thing you already knew would be a thing? Okay, so for one, the older models were changed in this fucking game. I don't know how you missed that. And second of all, it comes down to storage space. Like, when you have full 3D modeling for almost 900 characters, you're gonna have issues with storing all that data, along with the sound clips for all the cries, all of the fainting sounds, not to mention adding new things in. It's not about what they change, guy. It's about what they add and how much space one can realistically use for new content. You can only use so much of people's hard drives, not even factoring in cartridges or other media for physical copies of games, mind you, before people stop wanting to buy your game because it takes up too much space for the amount of enjoyment they get out of it.
You fucking donut!
Part 5. What these remakes should have been.
Nope!
You fucking donut!
Part 6. Is this game a sacrifice for Legends Arceus? So we understand this game is a hot piece of uncreative, unnecessary rehash of nostalgia garbage. Not a single drop of creativity went into this game. It's the most cynical Pokemon I've ever seen since USUM.
And this is the point of the video where I have full confirmation you are pretty much done, so I'm not even going to watch the rest of this. Okay, so I'm not going to lie, I started having migraines while working on this, and that's saying something because I have withstood some of the worst produced videos in the history of the fucking commentary genre. See Mr. the Fanboy. You have somehow managed to be a subjective review that I have several objective problems with, from a lisp the size of the sun, points that are somehow objectively wrong in spite of expressing subjective opinion, and flaunting around some shitty culinary pun like you're Gordon Ramsay when you're more the subject of a Kitchen Nightmares episode than anything resembling the host. Basically, this whole video was BDSP isn't platinum so I hate it, and bitching about newer generation thanks to your toxic nostalgia mold. The point where you started talking about what this should have been, judging it for what it's not instead of what it is, was probably the real point I should have given up. On top of the fact, you already basically been doing that throughout this entire video. I actually watched that section, and it was literally the same arguments that you've been making this entire time. Like, I don't get it. You're supposed to pad the video to get to 10 minutes, not fucking 50. Bottom line, this video was trash, but there were a couple of valid points in there. My advice, don't go into a game already wanting to hate it. And if you do, don't make a whole ass review about it without the first having a look at your own goddamn bias and figuring out if you're bringing a perspective that keeps other points of view into consideration. Okay, I'm going back to playing Genshin Impact. Henry, get back at the computer. I'm not Razor, damn it!
Dog.